Hello, everyone. My name is AJ. I'm a decision automation consultant from FlexRule. I'm thrilled to welcome you to the first technical webinar in our series on decision modeling with DMN. My teammate Rajita is also joining me today. If you have any question, feel free to write the question in the Q&A section. Thank you again for taking the time to join us. I hand over to Rajita to start the webinars.
Thank you, AJ. Hello, everyone. My name is Rajita, and I'm one of the decision automation consultant from FlexRule. So before we get further ado, let's get started. Let's have a look what's in our today's agenda. So we're going to talk about alternative to model and execute business rule and decisions. And secondly, we're going to talk about the key components of the DMN. And lastly, we're going to talk about DMN in action, which is a real-time scenario. So let's have a look at when you want to model business roles and decisions, what are the alternative approach you have? The first approach, of course, is a hardcore one. Secondly, you can use the legacy decision management suite, such as business role management system. Thirdly, you can use DMN. So let's have a look on the first approach, which is hardcore. You can use your software development toolkit and you develop rules and decisions, and you can put it inside your applications, workflows, and processes. So there are many drawbacks of this approach. You have to rely on software development and IT rule changes. So once they implement the rule change, they have to do the regression test and also acceptance test, and they have to roll it out throughout the organization. So it takes too much time for IT. So in the meantime, organizations should rely on older version of the rules, which is also a problem. The next approach is using a legacy solution like business rule management system. They are better than the hard coding solution because they use the centralized rule repository. So now, if change happens, you don't need to change your code because you can go to the rule repository and you can modify them. However, it's not always as simple as you change the rule because you need to understand the consequences of it. If the data source has changed or data structure has changed, so on. So those changes that are outside of the rule will still require code change. So therefore, yes, you can simply update the rules faster, but you still need to wait for a development team to do the rest of the job. So we have to keep in mind that vendors has the proprietary approach. Vendors build their own languages, they use their own interfaces, which not always has the best user experience, nor it has the transparency or clarity. And it does not establish the common language between business and IT. It becomes very difficult in your organization to scale the business to everyone because everyone needs to understand that specific language. And now you are logged in because they use their own language and their modeling platform. So in order to address those drawbacks, there is a standard called DMN. The whole purpose of this DMN is to create that common language in between IT and the business people. Not only they can understand, but they also can contribute to each other. Therefore, DMN is the best option to model and execute business decisions and business roles. So it reduces the complexity of decisions and it established that open standard for business and IT to communicate and collaborate to a decisioning project, and it improves the interoperability and best practices. So back in 2015, Object Management Group, which is a non-profit organization, established this standard. And what is important about this standard is because it used decades of expertise from thousands of professionals, and it offering the best practices for modeling and executing business roles and decisions. By leveraging this, you can inherit proven industry-wide experience, like best practices, which refined over 20 plus years. So DMN has 3 flavors, which comes as different conformance level. The first conformance level, which has actually no executable behavior. That means that it's just a beautiful picture. It has a communication value, but you can do it using the whiteboard anyway. The second one is it has a little bit of execution behavior. But when things get more complex, you cannot only use the conformance level tool. So having said that, you always think rules are not as complex, but when the project grows, your requirement evolves, you always need to do more complex business roles, decision logic and calculation, so on. Otherwise, you still need to rely on the IT teams. So it's very hard to judge in the very first day whether you need to have conformance level 2 or 3. But based on our experience, your requirement always evolve and new roles come into the picture, and you need to be able to cover all the different scenarios. Otherwise, it will defeat the purpose of using DMN. And the conformance level 3, which is fully executable and that always allow you to model simple business rule and decision to more complex and different scenario across the organization. So now let's look at the key components of DMN. So these are not all the key components of DMN. There are many others, but we don't talk all of them in today's webinar. The first is decision requirement diagram, which is also known as decision DRD, and decision table, field, and box expression. The first step to use DMN to model the decision-making scenario at conceptual level using diagrammic technique, which is similar to this image you can see in the screen. As you all know, pictures worth thousands of words, which makes communication much easier with your stakeholders because it's visual, easy to understand, and it doesn't have so many details. Now, once you define those decision-making scenario using decision requirement diagram, every single node can relate it to different components of the DMN, such as box expression or decision table, and so on. Now, the decision table is a standard way of in the DMN to model business role. The tabular form, it has input and output. Based on the input, it executes rules and it creates the outcome that you want. The green column denoted the conditions, and the pink column denoted as an action or otherwise output. We will see more of the decision tables in a minute while we're doing the demo. The field is an expression language. What is expression is a way that you express the behavior, like a formula in Excel. So if you want to do complex stuff in Excel, you need to use a formula. So that how DMN makes it's very extensible because you don't need to know programming languages. It has own business-friendly expression language, which is essentially simpler than Excel, and you can make more complex behavior and business logics. So the next one is box expression. Now we know that field expression, and so the box expression is a high level of field expression. It allows you to create reusable field expressions, so you can reuse them in different scenarios. There are multiple different kinds of box expression, and we are not going to discuss all these box expressions in this session, but we will talk about this box expression in a future webinar. In the standard itself, decision table is a type of box expression, but we specifically separate this into this conversation because we want to talk about the modeling business roles using the decision table. So in this webinar and throughout this webinar series, we're going to talk about the risk calculation scenario. So let me talk about this risk calculation scenario. So let's say if you want to apply for a loan, you need to be a credit worthy for a bank. So the bank need to make a decision about which risk category you fall into. Now let's focus on the first level, which is the most important level of decision modeling, which you need to illustrate how you make the decision using decision requirement diagram. So the next couple of slides, I'm going to map these different steps of this high level scenario to a different nodes of decision requirement diagram. Let's have a look. One of the power of the decision requirement diagram is it's an outcome driven. And what that means is you need to decompose a complex decision to a smaller subcomponents of it. So we want to understand what risk category associated with you as an applicant. Therefore, we need to determine the risk category. So for that, we need to have a decision node in our DRD called determine risk category. So, and then you go backward. You're going to ask yourself what are the other decisions will influence to this decision, determine the risk category. What are the dependencies of this particular decision? So you go backward, finding the dependencies. Now, in order to determine the risk category, we need to calculate the risk score. So in this scenario, we don't have any other decisions. The other things that will influence this calculating risk application is the application information of the applicant. Therefore, we need to have a node for that applicant data. And that's how you create the high level of this decision requirement diagram. The reason for doing this is the way is because decision requirement diagram helps you to start from the outcome that you need, and then allows you to find out dependencies and decompose them into a smaller subcomponent of that. You need to make that outcome. Now, the next level after that is we want to specify how each of these decisions are made in decision requirement diagram. So determine the risk category and the calculation of risk score. They are both decision nodes in decision requirement diagram. When you have a decision node and it's related to a business domain knowledge, in this scenario, determine the risk category and calculation of the risk score. It's a business domain knowledge in banking. So therefore, you need to have a business knowledge node. So one business knowledge for calculation of the risk score, and then you link them back to the decision logic, which in this case, a decision table. So we have a decision node in the decision requirement diagram, which will be invoking this decision table via business knowledge, which is called application risk score model. So the business knowledge allows you to define a function which is linked to a decision logic, which will be invoked by the decision node. Now, similarly for determining risk category, we use the business knowledge again. So the decision will call the business knowledge, which introduces a function, and it runs the decision logic, which implements the decision table like this. That's how you build the high-level decision scenario for this risk calculation. So let's dive into see and how does this work in the platform. So this is going to be interesting. So let me stop share and share mine. All right. This is the decision requirement diagram we talk about. So we have two decision node and two business knowledge. Now I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to create the input data structure, which is the applicant data. In order to create this one, I'm going to use the JSON format of my input data structure. Let me show you the input data structure. I'm going to use this data structure over here. So I'm going to create a fact concept for this one. And in the fact concept, I can simply import that JSON data file. Which is automatically created for you all these fact concepts. So let me save this one. And that's the application data node. So I need to create two decision tables for these two business knowledge node. So let's create the first decision table. I'm going to use the same name over here. So I have a predefined Excel sheet, which is this decision tables business role. Now I'm going to create 3 input for this decision table and 1 output. So let me create these 3 input. First one will be the age, which is the integer parameter. Next one will be marital status, which is a string. The other input node is employment status, which is again a string. All right, so the last one, the output, will be my application risk score, which is an integer value. All right, let me expand these columns so we can easily see that. So now I'm going to create multiple empty rows. And I'm going to copy this Excel data into my decision table. All right, let me save it and let's see what are the field expression is automatically created for you. So we have age parameter, marital status, and employment status. So I want to make this decision table as a multi-hit, which means that it processes all the rows. As it executes multiple rows, I need to sum up all these application risk score for my output. So for do that, I'm going to set the aggregation sum. So then in this case, I don't need to have this expression because it's already in the output variable, which is my application risk score. All right. So now I can validate this one, which has no errors. So that means this decision table is ready to go. So let me do the same steps for the other decision table, which I'm going to use the same naming for the as a business knowledge. Let me show you my other Excel sheet for the risk category, which has an existing customer. I'm going to copy this one and create one input for the existing customer, which is a Boolean value. My other input will be the application risk score, which is the output of the previous decision table. So which we define as the integer value. So my output will be, for this case, risk category, which is a string value. I'll expand the columns a little bit. Right. Now I'm going to create empty rows for this and go back to the Excel sheet and copy all the data and paste it over here. So I have extra row, which I don't need. I can delete it simply. So let me save it. So let's see the field expression. We have existing customer, application risk score, and risk category. So I want to make this decision table as a single hit because I only need to execute one particular row because it stops when the condition is met. So I'm going to properties and process all rows false. So let me validate. There is no error for this decision table, which means it's ready to go. So the last thing I have to do is I have to link those two decision tables to these two business knowledge. Now, risk category model goes over here, and the application risk score model is come over here. It's linked to this one, and the other one links to this one. So let me save this one and validate this decision requirement diagram again. So it's all ready to go. So I can run this, I can execute this decision requirement diagram. Either I can debug or run. So for the first time, I'm going to debug this one because I can show you each step by step when it executes. So I'm going to use the same input data, which I import before. So let me go to the decision requirement diagram, click on debug. So this particular applicant age is 58 and married, and the employment status is employed. Let's see which of these business roles is executed. So it's come to the first decision table. Since its age is 58, execute this business role, and the marital status is married and it's employed. So when it goes to the next decision node, so it's the application risk score is 138. So let's go to the next decision table. So now the application risk score is 138. The existing customer is false. Now let's see which business rule is executed. So it's execute the business rule, and my final output is risk category, which is very high. So it's successfully executed. This is how you model the decision requirement diagram and execute it for a particular risk calculation scenario. I think that's it for me from today's webinar. So we will continue this same example and build on top of this model to explain further things on the DMN for our upcoming webinar. So let me hand over to AJ again.
Thank you, Regita. Thank you for the presentation. Before we finish, we have a couple of questions. One of the questions is about deploying a created model to the cloud, specifically to Azure. How can we deploy the model to Azure cloud?
All right, that's an interesting question. So let me share my screen again for I can show you it in using the FlexRule Designer. So yeah, so we built this decision requirement diagram from scratch, and now we can easily deploy this model into your cloud scenario like AWS or Azure. So we have to click on this package builder. So you can give a package identifier and package version and the service version over here. And also it bundle all the dependencies for you. And also when you click on the deployment section, you can select what is your destination, Azure, either AWS or Google Cloud, and the FlexRule server as well. So let's say if you click on the Azure function, you can have all your credential details and just click on publish. So that's easy as it is.
Thank you. Perfect. I think enough. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. We hope to see you at the next one. If you have any suggestions for future topics, please feel free to email us. Have a great day. Thank you, Rajat, again.
Thank you.